We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
That's complicated.
in that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Network. If you're watching live, tried something new here. StreamYard had an upgrade, and you can actually auto-load the intro and the outro video, but I didn't realize there'd be that long pause after the music stops, which is kind of awkward, so I'll have to clean that up a little bit. But great to have you here watching along on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, all of the places, streaming live on Thursday? Yeah, Thursday afternoon. Great to have you here if you're watching or if you're listening on Monday when this rolls out. Have a great guest, familiar guest that you all, I would assume all, unless you've just found out about Lions of Liberty recently, you probably are very, very familiar with my guest. It's Marc Clair. I'll bring him on in just one moment. Before I do that, I just want to remind people, if you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, wherever, make sure you're following, subscribed, whatever it is, to the place where you are. Subscribe to the Lions of Liberty. Do it now. If you're listening, do that same thing to the podcast app you're listening on. Helps us tremendously. Helps us to break through shadow bans and all those good things. So let's bring on Marc without any further delay. Marc Clair, there he is, looking youthful, energized, ready to take on the world, and muted, I guess. Are you muted?
I hope not. I'm speaking.
Oh, no, there you are. Okay. What's new, man? Good to see you.
Things are good. I heard, as you sort of referenced before the show, I heard there was a light rain in the area recently. And I'm not being sarcastic because it really was a light rain for me. And then, suddenly my friends and family are all texting me, all two of them, to ask how I'm doing. And then only then did I actually turn on the news and see how bad it was just a few miles across the bridge over in St. Pete.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't really understand weather, which is kind of ironic to say, as I tried to major in meteorology. I think you know that.
I do remember that, actually, believe it or not.
But the pledging the fraternity kind of put a nix on that. Couldn't handle both those two things at the same time.
It's party or learn the weather. It's pretty much that's the choice you have to make. We all have to make at one point in life, and you chose the latter.
I could have been chasing down storms like what's that guy's name on the Weather Channel?
You can chase storms or chase tail, Odie, but you can't do both.
Exactly.
T-shirt.
Exactly. Anyway, I know a little bit about the weather. Apparently what happened, like why North Carolina and Tennessee got hit so hard, is there was a high pressure system sitting in the Northeast. Imagine a map behind me. And what happened is that high pressure sitting there kept the storm from moving, so it just parked itself right over North Carolina and Tennessee and just dumped a ton of rain, which apparently that part of the country had already had a ton of rain the previous week. So terrible situation down there, and we can get into that. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you about something that most people probably know, that you're not podcasting anymore, at least not right now.
I mean, I'm on one right now, so clearly there's some amount of podcasting going on.
You don't have your own podcast at the moment. Maybe never again. I don't know. This might be the last podcast people ever hear from you. Who knows? Maybe.
It's possible.
So what happened? Why'd you stop on the podcasting?
I think to answer this question, I might have to go back to why did I continue podcasting after Lions of Liberty instead of just taking a break from podcasting or just not podcasting or whatever it may be. And I think what it came down to is there were, as I went further along in Lions of Liberty towards the part where we decided to part ways on the podcast project, there were a lot of subjects and areas in my mind that I wanted to explore, that I wanted to get into. And that was kind of where I went with the podcast. But what I really realized somewhere along the way is that at the end of the day, I was kind of podcasting because I had trained myself to podcast for so long. As you know, we, even within Lions, we were always, hey, if we didn't have an episode, we'd always be reaching out to somebody, trying to figure it out together, whatever we had to do to make sure we had that consistency. I think I trained myself so darn good that even when I no longer had the same impetus or the same direction behind it, I still thought I had to podcast every Monday, and I thought I had to have a new episode. So I mean, I really enjoyed what I did with the show. But I came to a point where I kind of talked about everything I wanted to talk about. And then I was like, all right, well, I got to find some other things to talk about. And then I started asking myself, well, why? Why? And there were people that are fans of the show that were supporting the show. You know, the show didn't cost me money to produce or anything like that. But it's still, as you know, no matter how much money you have coming into a show, you still have to dedicate a lot of time for the most part. Most people do, unless you have a whole, massive team running your show. So it basically just came down to a matter of priorities. I had when I first started the show as well, I had just moved to Florida. Basically didn't have hardly any sources of income. I was working a little bit with Mikkel on the side at that point, and I was trying to start some entrepreneurial things, but we basically moved here with some suitcases and a hope and a prayer. And, so at that point, dedicating a bunch of time to the podcast wasn't that crazy because it's one of the many entrepreneurial ventures as I started. But as the last 2 years played out, I found myself spending more and more time on more lucrative activities. Or if there was little time left over, I started to be like, well, why am I going to podcast now instead of spending time with my family? Why am I now going to go sit on, talk about this or that? Because I think I'm supposed to. That's really what it came down to. So it started as a break because I just ran into a point in life where I just had a lot going on. I was traveling for work. We had a bunch of things happening at the same time. And there was just no way I was going to, and I had it all lined up that I was going to record like 6 episodes in 4 days so that I could do what I had to do and keep my schedule going. And it just broke me. I just fucking lost it. Like not in the crazy way, but I was just like, I can't do this. I was like, why am I? And then I started to ask, why am I doing it? Why do I feel the need that I have to record these 6 episodes? Who am I answering to here? Yes, fans of the show, but even fans of the show, when I talk to them, they're like, dude, no one's going to be mad at me, So I realized that I didn't have to force myself to do it. So at the point, I just kind of went on a hiatus. Technically, I'm still on hiatus, but I got to be honest, hiatus has been awesome, and not podcasting has been one of the greatest things in my life. Probably not something you thought you'd hear from me a few years ago. And look, it's still the honeymoon period. This has only been maybe 3 or 4 months now that I've stopped podcasting. I'm not making any lifelong statements on this. It's possible I could podcast again at some point. I'm podcasting with you right now. I like this part. I like the part of sitting around talking to people about whatever, shooting the shit. What I don't like is all the other stuff, the stuff you know about, the stuff that you got to do when we finish the show to get it all out there. And really to do that, as I think that's totally fine to do as something as a hobby or as something that's not necessarily going to make you a lot of money. But for me, the place that I was in life, I no longer was interested in little hobbies like that. I have other hobbies that I'd like to do if I'm going to have a little bit of time left. But the truth is I didn't have a little bit of time left. I'm balancing 2 careers, essentially. I'm balancing, or you can just call that entrepreneurship, however you want to look at it. But I'm balancing a lot of stuff that pays money and supports my family. Podcasting just simply wasn't doing that. Not at a grand scale anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've gone through a similar transition, as you know, going into full-time entrepreneurship in early August, really making that decision. But once you start looking at your schedule and the things you're doing, the way you're spending your time, and you do X, Y, and Z, and those things put money in your pocket, maybe not right at that moment, but you know that they will lead to money in your pocket. And then you look at the podcast you're doing, it's like, okay, I have to figure out, how is this going to put money in my pocket? And if you can't really figure out how to do that, then what you're actually doing, you mentioned spending time with your family. I like to spend time with my family. If I'm doing something that's taking away from spending time with my family, I think that's robbing from them. It's robbing from me, and there's no return. Now, if I'm spending time away from my family and I'm producing something that's going to make our life better, getting paid or whatever, then there's justification for that. So I think with podcasting is what I'm trying to do here, and the pivot will continue, is to align my podcast with things that I'm working on and things that I care about, ways that I'm producing income. And like that way, and people who aren't interested in those things, that's fine. You don't have to listen. That's okay.
You should encourage them not to.
Yeah,
be honest.
exactly.
I mean, you should encourage people not to listen if they're not aligned with what you're doing. That's my advice to everybody in almost every niche, really, at the end of the day, because we have to really find our target people as entrepreneurs. When you're in business, you have to really focus on just your people, depending on your product. I guess there are some products like Bounty, like paper towels or Tide or something like this. Even that, look at how effective their branding is. I'm naming brands. I'm not just saying paper towels. I'm naming brands. Because if you effectively blanket the market with advertising, sure, you can influence, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not what most entrepreneurs are talking about, at least at the individual level. You have to really hone down and find your people. And to do that, you have to, this is the same thing we always talked about in podcasting. It's the same exact thing in entrepreneurship, really. And kind of shoo off the rest. Now, there's different layers to your people. Some of your people are just interested in what you're talking about. Maybe they're not going to buy a course or support your Patreon, but that's okay. They're still your people. They still support what you're doing and are interested in what you're doing. There's layers within that. But if people aren't interested in what you're doing, there's no reason to really beat around the bush. There's no reason to let them to tease them about that it's going to be one thing and then they're going to find out you're sneaking in entrepreneurship. No, you should beat them over the head with it and tell them, if this is what I'm going to do, if you like it, welcome. If not, no worries. We can still be friends or whatever outside of this, but you don't need to follow it. That's my philosophy.
Yeah. And there's so many options out there for podcasting. Yeah. Trying to please everyone, you're going to please nobody, and you're not going to have a following at all if you try to go that route. So you mentioned a moment ago, I think you mentioned Expat Money. You mentioned Mikel, at least, working with him. And we've been advertising here for his upcoming the Expat Money Summit. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you got started working with Mikel, what you're doing, and then we can get into the summit.
Sure. It is kind of an interesting story that a lot of people just look up, they kind of remember me from one thing or another, whether it's libertarian podcasting or whether it's something else. I've been involved in a few other weird niches. Then one day I pop up and I'm talking about expat stuff. It's like, wow, what's going on? But it really wasn't a one day thing for me at all. It was something that really evolved over time. I think I first interviewed Mikel on Lions of Liberty because he reached out to me when he was first starting the business that I currently work with him in. He was, at the time, it was just him. He was just one guy. He left Canada when he was a teenager and, became an entrepreneur. He's completely self-taught, dropped out of school, completely self-taught in every level, including entrepreneurship, including how to get second passports, how to get second residencies, how to buy international real estate. He learned all of this stuff on his own and then decided to start a consulting business I would say it's around 2017, 2018 when I first interviewed him on that. That interview, we just hit it off. We just became really good friends, realized we really just shared similar values and everything. And so we kind of became friends on and offline a little bit. We talked I think I had him on the podcast a couple of times talking about the expat stuff, which at the time for me, I was interested in it from the freedom, liberty angle of things, moving your life one way or another, buying property, getting a residency, all with the greater endeavor of increasing your liberty and protecting your wealth. But I was also very interested in it because I had done a lot of traveling in my late 20s, early 30s. I'd been to a lot of these countries and I had really discovered things like, wait a minute, I can spend about a third of what I spend at home to live very, very well in places like this. You realize this just from traveling through, and it did start the ball rolling. I mean, this is well before, I'm talking 2008, 2010. Yeah, we had the internet, but online jobs were not so much of a thing. Remote work was not a remotely common thing. So I don't think I ever even at the time made the connection. Hey, maybe I could get a remote job someday. But definitely the cost was, and how nice it is to visit other countries. My God, there's just so much cool stuff out there in the world. So that stuff was in the back of my mind. And then meeting Mikel and seeing how he shared such values with mine and how it really lined up with all that stuff that was in the back of my mind. There was a lot of synergy there. So I had it on the podcast a couple of times. And then, as you know, around 2020, 2021, things got a little weird. Things got a little shaky. I ended up spending a few months in Mexico. I actually ended up between my two times in Mexico for long periods. I spent about 3 or 4 months there. When things first happened, so to speak, and then ended up living there for almost a year later on, a couple of years later. I pretty much did the expat thing to some extent. So I experienced that a little bit. And as I was making those moves, Mikel reached out to me because he was going from being a solo consultant to expanding it into a true business. So he was starting to try to find ways to improve and bring on people that could help him. So he just reached out to me and say, hey man, I'm just there's one thing I'm struggling with, and that's the podcast. That's growing the podcast. And all he knew about me was that we got along, we shared similar values, and he knew that I had done some pretty cool things with this podcast. Mm-hmm. So I was able to give him a lot of advice. He just brought me on at first as a consultant, just to basically just monthly, come up with strategies, come up with ways for him to grow the show, help him strategize with guests, all that stuff. And I say this because none of the stuff I learned podcasting. Yeah, I learned video editing in college. My other career is like TV production and that sort of thing. So there's some connection, but everything I knew about podcasting was just stuff that I learned from a hobby. And then here I was one day taking that advice that I only learned. I never read a book about podcasting. I basically learned from doing it for the most part.
Wait, you didn't take a podcasting course in college? What?
No, not in college, my friend. There probably are podcasting courses.
I'm sure there's probably podcasting majors in college.
Yeah, there probably is. Maybe we'll find ourselves teaching these kids one day. Where was I? Somewhere.
I don't know. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Got distracted with podcasting courses. The point is, I sort of had this light bulb moment where I realized, well, wait a minute, I can take my life skills and just start delivering them to people in various ways. Mm-hmm. So I started this is also when I realized, one way or the other, my wife and I were not going to be living in Los Angeles for a number of reasons. Obviously, the events of 2022 spurred those on. But just looking at the bigger picture, I was no longer, a 20-something single guy in Los Angeles. Just looking at even besides the 2020 stuff, do I have to keep saying that? Even besides all the COVID bullshit, there's just a lot of economic reasons that a city for Los Angeles, like Los Angeles, is a lot more difficult of a place to live a nice life in. Yeah, sure, you can have. It took me a while to get up to the amount of money I was making doing one job in Los Angeles. It took me a while to get to. I'm at that point now, but now I'm living in Florida, where that money goes a hell of a lot further. Now, Of course, Floridians here complain about how expensive it is now. I understand it's all relative, but this is still, you can live a much better life. And the same is true of where I am now compared to some other places and some other places outside the country. So it's all very relative, but my real thing is I just want to continually improve the situation for myself and my family. It's that simple. So it's for the interim bringing them to the United States and bringing ourselves to Florida was a massive improvement. It was risky because we did move essentially with very little but a hope and a dream, but it was a lot better than, to me, bringing them out of Los Angeles and just doing the same old thing I'd been doing and maybe barely scraping by, even making fairly high, fairly easy income.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying for years, as you know, to get Brian out of Los Angeles, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think
I think it's hopeless.
I think it's hopeless. Yeah, I think he's there.
See, people got to come to it. The thing is, we got to stop trying. That's the thing. If we keep badgering him on it, then the pride kicks in, and then so we just got to back off. In fact, we should tell him, Brian, you belong in Los Angeles, my friend.
Never leave, right Brian. There. If I ever saw anyone that belonged more in Los Angeles than you, then I don't know. I have to think about that approach, but
yeah, I don't need to go through all the steps. But the point is, it's the business relationship started that way through basically him just helping me monetize the hobby, but doing so, I did start becoming a little more entrepreneurial. I was still doing TV stuff in the freelance end, whereas before that I was doing it full time in Los Angeles, and then he basically just every once in a while would be like, hey, can you do this thing for me too? I have a need for this. I have a need for that. And then eventually we said, all right, do you want to actually just come in and like really be part of this company? So he first brought me on, what you might call full-time, I suppose, as his content manager. So then I'd start overseeing everything involving his blog, the YouTube channel, the podcast, et cetera, et cetera. And today I am now the director of content and marketing. So I pretty much oversee just about anything that comes out of this company that faces the public or for our private clients or anything like that. So that's the short version of how I turned a hobby into more. Of course, I've had to learn a lot more along the way. There's a lot of skills I've gotten to develop that, frankly, I can see working with this company for a really long time. I've been a huge part of its growth. The first phone call I was on, the first Zoom call with this company was 3 people. And now there are around 30 weekly calls with the people that work with the company. So the company has grown very quickly, and I absolutely love working with this company. So I will continue to do that. I don't want to say till I die, but until it dies, or, that'll probably be part of what I do for a really long time because I'm really passionate about it at this point. I actually see how what Mikkel does changes lives. I see the necessity of it, and I see it as so much more than what I thought it was at the time. At the time, I thought, oh, cool, he helps people move to other countries. That's neat for people that want to do that. for the small amount of people that want to do that. I thought it was very much for just the people that want to pick up their bags and move tomorrow. And it certainly is for those people, certainly. But there are a whole lot of people that listen to this show, people that understand the problems of the world, people that know about, the World Economic Forum and all of this sort of machinations that go on. And they realize and they understand the economic problems of the United States, the national debt, the problems with the dollar, the inevitable move towards de-dollarization. These are all things that are just inevitably going to happen. So you don't have to want to move your country to realize to move where you want to live, to know that you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. Now, a lot of of the libertarian Austrian economics types people already understand this. So they're probably already more diverse than your average Joe in their investments. I would think people like this are more likely to own more gold or even just GLD and other gold stocks and this sort of thing. So that's a step. But think about the other basket. If you're still all in the one basket that is the United States, at the end of the day, your eggs are still all in one basket. Even if you just own stocks and even if you own a bunch of real estate, if it's all in the US, that's all one basket, and you are essentially betting on the U.S. So internationalizing and diversifying your investments, it's a totally separate conversation from moving completely overseas. And that's why I can talk about this stuff so well, because spending 10 years in the libertarian / conservative / Austrian economics world, everybody I know understands these problems. I don't have to sell anybody on anything. They come to us because we're the ones with the solutions. We're the ones that are out there helping people. And Mikkel is the most genuine person ever. He is completely as legit as they come. So I can very happily work with someone like this that they're never going to try to vax me. He's never going to try to mask me. In fact, he doesn't really care what I do in my life so long as I deliver for him, which I do, if I do say so myself. So, yeah, we can take that wherever you want, but it's really been a lot of in terms of the entrepreneurial side of things. And I still do other things outside of Mikkel. He's just what you would call my biggest and most important client, who I spend the majority of my time focusing on. But I still do TV production on a freelance level. I still do some traveling for that sort of thing. And it's up to me to balance it. That's really the entrepreneurial part of things is figuring out your own balance and understanding how to prioritize. Understanding, for example, it's the Expat Money Summit next week. As you know, it's a big week. So am I going to focus 100% of my attention on that and away from other stuff and make sure I have that stuff set for other clients or anything else I need to do? 100%. I'm 100% on that next week but that's my own management. That's my own understanding of the importance of things. That's not Mikkel having to tell me, hey, make sure you're around. Like, he's never had to tell me that because I just know. And I think that's the difference between people that can be. And I'm not saying everybody can't be an entrepreneur, but not everybody. I don't want to say has the skill set, but not everybody has maybe the drive to do it or wants to deal with it because it's a lot. It's not easy. It's stressful as hell.
Yeah,
so I don't even blame anybody.
I think there's some people inherently, as I just dropped the baseball I was holding. That's a secret. I hold a baseball while I podcast.
Has that been your secret this whole time?
Actually, I have a backup baseball.
You don't want to know what I'm holding.
That's all right. I'm good. I got another baseball. I practice my grips. That's a curveball there. See,
very impressed.
So I forgot what I was going to ask, but talking about entrepreneurs. So I think some people inherently do have traits to become entrepreneurs. Like some people, I don't think have the even capacity to enter into like an employer-employee relationship and work for a corporation. I know people that they try for a week and like, I can't do this. I can't be here. And then there's people like me, like I was able to do that. I can operate in that environment, but I hate it. Like right. I'm able to, make it work. But when I'm outside of that, I'm able to manage my time. It's like a weight is lifted off of my chest. And I'm able to, there's like so many different directions I can go in, and it's so freeing. Yes, it's stressful and you have to deliver, right? You have to know where to allocate your time, like you just talked about there. And I mean, I don't think that part is necessarily that difficult. Once you get in the flow of it, you can figure out, who your most important clients are, what your most important deals you're working on or projects, whatever. But yeah, I think it can be learned by most people. There's probably some people, whatever segment of the population, 20%, that probably could never be entrepreneurs, that they need to be managed. They need somebody helping them. They need things fed to them. But I think probably most of the population could probably learn it to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a nature nurture conversation sort of thing, because I think so many of us, we are nurtured through public school and whatnot, to be just to do what we're told and just follow the directions and do this and that. So we almost have to unlearn that schooling to teach ourselves to be more independent, depending on how you were raised or what kind of examples you might have had at home. But if your best example was at school, that's probably the only way you're going to be able to think, and it's going to be a little more difficult. But yeah, I think in terms of people being born, yeah, I think probably, this is a grander conversation, but I think everybody could develop those skills for sure. I think a lot of it's not how the system teaches us to think.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Expat Money Summit. We've been
insist.
promoting it on this show. I am signed up for it, so I'm excited for that. Tell us about exactly when it is and how people can get involved with it, join it, take part in it, I guess is the right way to say it, and what it is.
Well, if you're cool enough to watch this live, then I will tell you it starts this coming Monday, but you might be listening to the podcast, which I think drops on Monday, in which case it might already be happening, in which case stop what you're doing right now. I actually mean that. Stop what you're doing, press pause. Even if it's the live show, you could press pause. Just press pause, go to expatmoneysummit.com. Just enter your email, choose a ticket. There's a free ticket option. You'll be able to see 90% of the presentations with that free ticket, and just get it. Figure out the rest later, because you're not going to want to miss this stuff. And everything that will air live will also be available for 24 hours. So if you can't make it in right away, no worries. But why should you even watch this? That's the question. Why should you even take your time away? Because I can tell you it doesn't cost anything to attend. Great. But it does cost something. It does cost your time. And as we talked about, time is very precious and people have to divide their time. So the reason I think you should go is, especially if you have a view that I used to have when I started working with Mikkel. If you had the view that the word expat and the word offshore was only about one thing and one thing only, and that was picking up your entire family, dumping all your stuff into suitcases and moving everybody overseas to some other country, that is an end game for some people. And that is certainly the farthest you can take it. But at the basic level, it's about simply protecting your wealth and diversifying your finances and diversifying your holdings and having a backup plan, having a plan B. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Even if you never want to leave the country that you're in, even if you never want to take a trip, you can own property outside the country. You can have offshore finances outside the country. Now, of course, I would recommend doing a lot more than taking a trip. I recommend seeing the world to everybody. But the point is, I don't have to try to convince anybody out there to learn how to move to another country if you don't want to. I think it's an awesome idea, especially if you have mobile income, if you have most of your income online, as I do. Obviously, a large portion of my income is online now. At some point, it will probably make sense for us to fully go overseas, and everything. Especially with my wife being Mexican, I can pretty much get Mexican citizenship, not with a snap of a finger, but not too far from it if we just spend a little bit of time there. And there are other options we've looked at right now. For now, we're really happy in Florida. At least I love that I have 0% state income tax, which is great for having online income. Another reason I would probably never go back to an income tax state, because it would just be crazy just to start paying needless taxes on having most of my income online. But this is really for anybody that wants to protect their wealth, their hard-earned wealth. And I hope that's everybody. I really hope that's everybody. You'll get to learn about all sorts of different aspects of this too. You can also learn how to get a remote job, how to take some of your income online. So you could, even if you don't just become an expat tomorrow, imagine just having the ability to go take a 2 months trip somewhere and still be working and be spending, a third the amount of money, just, having and exploring a new culture, exploring a new place. This is all the stuff that I personally find cool, but not everybody does. Not everybody wants to go spend. I can't tell you why. I think it's awesome. Every time I've been to another country, it's just been an incredible experience. So I can't recommend it highly enough. But that's more of a Mark thinks this is a cool thing. But I don't need to convince everybody that doesn't even care about taking a vacation, even let alone living in another country. I don't think I need to convince anybody that you want to protect your wealth, right? I don't think I need to convince anybody that you don't want to see all of your hard-earned wealth just dissipate away due to inflation, due to de-dollarization, due to all the various things that are coming. It's not a question. This is why we don't have to do sales. We just have to find the people that already understand the same problems we do. This stuff's all coming. It's just a matter of when and how, and that I cannot answer, and I'm not going to pretend to be able to answer. I am not going to pretend to know when any of this stuff can happen. Maybe they can keep this stuff floating for another 50 years, for all I know. but for all I know, they can't hold it till tomorrow. I just don't know. What we do know is these certain things are going to happen, and they're not all going to happen overnight. De-dollarization is not going to happen overnight. Your money's not going to get inflated away overnight, but there are things that you can start doing today that don't cost a lot of money either. Just buying a little gold, even things as simple as buying a little gold offshore. That's just one simple step you can do to diversify. Even if that means selling gold that you own here to get some more offshore, that's just one small step that you can take to diversify a little bit. There are, of course, many, many, many ways to do this. Mikkel himself is at the far extreme of this. He has sold all his stocks and doesn't own a single stock because he thinks the stocks are just going down, period. Again, he doesn't know when either, but he knows it's going to happen. We don't give financial advice. We just show you what we're doing, and we show you what people are doing. And if you need help, we have the ability to help you do that stuff legally. But I can tell you what Mikkel has done is he's gotten out of stocks entirely, and he has all his money in international real estate projects, 100% of it, and gold, I should say. And other things like that, hard assets, timber, teak, this sort of thing. But he doesn't own a single stock, as far as I know. Don't quote me on that, but he says this publicly. He is entirely out of stocks in terms of investments.
Yeah, I mean, the stock market is a casino, essentially. You can make a lot of money in it. You can lose it. You can definitely lose a lot of money in it.
I've done both.
It's not, there's no guarantee there. So with looking at this guest list here, I mean, heavy hitters.
Yeah, I didn't even get to that yet.
Ron Paul, Dr. Ron Paul, mind you, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Marc Faber, Tom Luongo. So this is October 7th through 11th. My question is, so which one of those days is entirely just Scott Horton talking?
Right, because it would have to be. I believe Scott's talk is on Friday, and it's gonna be interesting because he has an early morning talk. So I hope Mikkel's prepared to rein him in a little bit. But no, I mean, Scott's going to give an awesome talk. And this is another area where having the experience that I had with Lions of Liberty has come back to me in this really interesting way. Because for the first time, I used to help Mikkel buy some advertising on podcasts for the summit, because we really like to do, as you know, what we've done. We like to support like little guy type podcasts, like not just the Joe Rogans of the world. We intentionally, as part of the summit, we spend $50,000-$60,000 just supporting smaller, like libertarian, like-minded podcasts. Obviously we hope that people that hear our ads come to the summit. Of course, that's what we want, but part of it is kind of like, we want to support these voices too. We want to support, we give a lot of, we have Scott Horton. So we also are advertising with Dave DeCamp of Anti-War News, with Kyle Anzalone. We really want to support the voices that we think are important, that we think should be lifted up out there as part of this event too. But it is really a full circle moment, because you're reading that guest list, and Mikkel knows Doug Casey very well, so he can take credit for Doug Casey and Marc Faber. But the original connections to a lot of these guys were through me, to Ron Paul, to Scott Horton, to Tom Woods, to Tom Luongo, that I all had contacts through my silly little podcasting hobby. So it's really funny how all of not just the skills is one thing, but also the connections I've made over those years have really, really come to bear fruit. And they've come to really shape what this summit looks like, which again, it costs you nothing to attend, and has names like this that So even if you're not, there's over 40 talks at this thing. So you'd have to be a superhuman to actually try to attend every single talk. I wouldn't expect anybody to necessarily do that. Of course, there are ways you can access, we have higher paid tickets where you can access stuff afterwards if you really want to consume everything. No, but I would recommend just going and grabbing a free ticket, expatmoneysummit.com, expatmoneysummit.com. Again, it costs you nothing at all to get yourself a ticket and get yourself in there. And yeah, there's really cool talks. It's going to be a talk by Ron Paul, like you said, probably a very long talk, but an interesting one from Scott Horton, Tom Woods. These guys, are going to be giving talks they're not given elsewhere. They're giving them here at the Expat Money Summit, and it's just going to be a great time. Now, besides those headline speakers, I booked those guys because they're smart. They talk about interesting stuff, and they grab your attention because you've heard of them. That's why I get those guys. But even then, within that, there are going to be other experts that from Mikkel's 20 years of being an expat, he has acquired a Rolodex of experts throughout the industry, many of whom would cost thousands of dollars to sit down and actually have these conversations with. But we're putting it out there completely free of charge, because we realize this is the best way to protect yourselves and your family through crafting a plan B. And it's not just one thing. There's many aspects to it. Again, not everybody will take every single aspect. The ultimate aspect being get a residency in another country, move to that country, get a passport of that country, become a citizen of that country. And especially, I think something you'll probably get from a lot of the anarcho-capitalist types in your crowd. They might say, wait a minute, another citizenship, doesn't that just make you more of a statist? You're joining another state. Well, if you prefer to look at things that way, yes, sure. I don't care about you. You're not for us. If that's the way you think, don't come to the summit. We don't need you there. You're not going to be the kind of person that's going to get value from it, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, your double status. How many countries you're going to join to be a citizen?
What it does do is give you more options. Is the point? It gives you more options in life. More options is always better, the way I see it. And if something does happen politically in the United States, if a Kamala Harris does become elected and they really do crack down on people with with dissident views, what the government can always do, whether they decide it's because you're late on taxes or they just don't like your political views, the government can take your passport. And if they take your passport, you are trapped in this country. However, they cannot take your passport from another country. That's the key that's why getting a second passport, even if you never intend to use it, is such a key backup plan, because they can say, of course, there are things like extradition, and maybe if there's a true crime, they could make an agreement with that country to keep you. But generally speaking, the United States government is not allowed to, or any other government cannot take your citizenship from another country. They cannot rob you of that. You're the citizen of that country, and you have to be allowed to go back to that country.
I'm sold. No longer is it 7 streams of income. It's 7 passports.
7 passports.
No, seriously. I mean, not seriously 7, but that's the best
6
I've heard
countries
it
you
laid
can
out.
get kicked out of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best I've heard it laid out. The reason to get another citizenship. That is.
Well, maybe I should lead with that, because I often lead with people that say they don't want to, because a lot of people aren't thinking about moving the country, so I'll talk more about diversifying the wealth, buying international real estate, especially because a lot of people don't realize you probably do too. Everybody that's been working for 20 years or something probably has an old 401k kicking around somewhere they rolled it over from somewhere. Any 401k, as long as you've left that company where it originated, any 401k, if you've rolled that over at any point in time, you can roll that amount of money over to a self-directed IRA, and you can purchase international real estate with it. And most people don't realize, you think about massive real estate deals, you can get income producing condos in Brazil for 70 grand. You can get income producing real estate in Paraguay for 50, 60, 70 grand. It's not that most people have one of these just sitting around. They don't realize you can just make a phone call, fill out some forms, and you've got international real estate in your portfolio now. That's not just sitting in some 401k with some mutual fund that maybe you checked off a box of years ago and you don't even know where it is. So the fact is, most people can unlock that stuff. But maybe I should lead with this aspect of it, because it perks your ears up. So,
well, I think you've been successful already in this show, because friend of the show, Adam Choate, he has learned something. So we should just stop the show now.
I always thought that was the part everybody knew, so I would always gloss over it. So I got to rethink my framing a little bit. I will now lead with the government is going to take your passport, so you better get a second one.
All kinds of comments here from Andrew.
I don't want to say it can never happen, because if you're actually wanted, thank you, Nicole. If you're actually wanted for like murder or something, I'm not saying you can then just go to your home country and you're not going to have a problem.
But we're not going to hold you to that legally, Mark.
Right.
It's.
But if they're trying to politically persecute you, or you're just behind on your taxes, that's your issue with the U.S. government. It ain't St. Lucia's issue with your passport. So you can still go home to St. Lucia if you have a St. Lucia passport, as a random example of a country.
Well, that's cool. So anything else with expat money that you want to talk about before we move on to some current events rapid fire?
No, I think we've hammered people with the marketing enough. But I will say, as my sort of final word on that, yes, I work with this company, and yes, they pay money to me. So of course I have a motivation for this, but I can honestly say, for the first time in my life that I've worked for a company per se, it wasn't even a company when it started. When it started, it was a guy named Mikkel, but now it's a real, what I would call a legit, rapidly growing company. I can say this is the first company I've worked for where it does not feel like work. I really, really love what I'm doing. It's not just helping people get second passports. That's fun. It's actually growing a company. That's fun. It's seeing all the lives that are changed from within the company. I mean, there are people, probably most of my team, I manage an international team. Most of them are from Brazil. I mean, having just this job and them getting seeing how they've done better in the last couple of years. Not just they've all increased their skill sets, they've all increased their English speaking skill sets. They're all making far more money, even what people in the US might think. Some of them make low salaries. They're all making far more money than any of their contemporaries that in their neighborhoods. So they're all doing so much better as well, because we're providing such a service helping other people. So it's all of it is helping people. And again, I work with someone who's really, really a great person and will never try to vax me or jab me or do the things that I don't like that companies can do sometimes. That's never going to happen here. That's my final statement on that. So because of that, I would personally appreciate it if you would go to expatmoneysummit.com and get yourself, again, a complimentary, perfectly free ticket to the summit. And I hope to see you guys there. Now, fire away.
Do it now. I got mine. I'll be there. And I have to share this, Mark. If you do ever start your own LLC, your own marketing firm, there's your name. Marketing. I'm sure it's available. I mean, yeah. I'm sure it's available. All right. So let's talk about current events here. Let's start with the election. Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. Thoughts?
I haven't been following YouTube rules in a while. Am I allowed to say things about 4 years ago or not? How does that work? Or
you can say anything.
You don't care anymore?
No, they don't care anymore.
Okay, then I'll just blatantly say it. I absolutely think there's just no chance in hell Trump doesn't legitimately win the election. That's what I believe is going to happen. However,
there's no chance he's going to win the election, or
I might have doubled negative that. No chance he doesn't. Legitimately.
Okay.
I think he will have the votes that should allow him to be the president of the United States. Whether that is what will be reported or what will occur, I don't know. Because at this point, I think we have a regime that is a bit of a dying animal. And I want to be clear. I'm not some if just Trump just wins, all the problems get better. No.
Right.
But given the options, I think it's actually, I think it is shockingly, which I didn't think I would say being a libertarian person these last, 4 years ago and 4 years ago before that. I think it's the first time there actually is a bit of a difference, a bit of a bigger difference than maybe ever before. Maybe even bigger than there was necessarily between Trump and Hillary, if you can believe that. Because the Kamala wing of the party, or whatever you want to call that, it might even be crazier than the Bill Clinton wing of things that are we're these establishment evil pedophile types, and we all know that. But man, they're really. But the Kamala people are all annoying wine grandmas and wine aunts, and I think that might be worse running the country. I mean, look what's going on right now, man. This is scary shit that's going on overseas. And we don't actually know who the president is. In all seriousness, we don't. The president was told he's not running. He was sat down and told he's not running. I mean, that's clearly what happened here. So, which makes you think, if he's told he's not running the country in a few months, has he been told he's not running it now? And if so, who is? And I just hope it's not this woman. That being said, I don't
think Joe Biden's been running the country for the past 3.5 years. And I don't think Kamala's going to run the country. There's a machine behind them that's running things, and they want to keep power.
Yeah. And I don't live in this illusion that Trump is necessarily some man of the people. I mean, Trump represents another group of elites who also want to do things their way. And it's entirely possible their way might not work out that wonderful either. So I'm not going to go hoo-hoo, rah-rah this whole thing. But given the options, again, clearly, I'd rather at least maybe try my hand with the other group of technocratic elites that want to do things their way, that at least haven't expressed that they want me dead very openly, as the other side has pretty much been clear about. So, I'll roll with those guys.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for the people that don't want to kill me. That's pretty easy.
You notice what I didn't mention, Odie, which I used to talk about all the time, was voting on principle. I didn't mention that because that's dumb, and you may as well not vote then, and you may as well just play yourself out of the whole process, which I'm fine with. I wouldn't even really argue it, especially on the federal level. I don't think voting matters that much. Your local stuff matters a lot more. So I would encourage you to, but even then, I wouldn't encourage you just to show up at your local election and flick a box. I mean, if you understand the people running and think and know how it will affect you, then participate in it. But if you're not, then don't. Leave it to the adults. Leave it to the adults that are actually looking into things.
So I'm dropping everything today. So with that said, I'm going to dip my toes into this conversation. What are your views on the libertarian candidate?
I think he is perfect. I think he's the perfect libertarian
principled
candidate. I'm not kidding. I think he's the perfect libertarian candidate. I think he perfectly encapsulates libertarianism. I think he perfectly encapsulates what the Libertarian Party is and always will be in some level. He's like a more libertarian version, and I mean this in the non-complimentary way, version of Gary Johnson. He's the more perfect degenerate for the party. He's even more perfect of a shining example of the only place the Libertarian Party could have ever led. I'm not a told you so type person, so I'm not going to say it. But if I were, man, you couldn't have written a better script for me to say that with.
I'm sure you remember this when we were at the Libertarian Convention in New Orleans, I believe. And there were the degenerates up front holding dildos up and waving them around. Mm-hmm. And essentially, it's that wing of the party that got their guy to be the nominee. So
somehow
that's
the
where
Mises
the party
takeover
is.
happened, but those guys won the presidency. How? Again, I don't want to say those words, so I won't. But this has been documented in several years of podcasts. These predictions were very accurately made, not by me as much as by just people I tended to agree with about it. But I mean, what can we say? What is there to say? Now, I'll be the first to admit if Dave ended up running, it probably would have been a much different result, and maybe the conversation would be very different. So maybe a lot of this is really just about one person at the end of the day. But maybe that's why you shouldn't make a whole movement around one person either. I mean, that's not, and Dave was not the impetus of the Mises Caucus. I'm not going to pretend he was, but he quickly became the marketing point behind the takeover. Whether it was stated that way or not, it's what most people
became
believe.
More than marketing. He became the brains behind the Mises Caucus.
Yeah, you could say that too. You could say that too.
I think he would say that.
I don't know.
I think he has.
That he's the brains behind the Mises Caucus.
Well, I mean, he.
Well, let's spread the rumor anyway. Dave Smith was the brains behind the Mises Caucus. There, you can take that quote. No, I would never insult Dave like that.
Yeah, Dave's
I
great.
think Dave
and
did the
honestly,
right thing.
Prediction here from me. I don't think it'll happen in 2028 if we still have a country in elections. But in 2032, if we still have a country in elections, I think Dave Smith might run as a Republican, and he might do well.
Slightly gray-haired David Smith will go by, like whatever his middle name is. He'll be like David Ralph Smith or something like that.
David Ralph Smith.
I'm just assuming.
DRS. That's
DRS.
presidential.
No, DRS. I would get behind with like the whole deal, the whole package, the slightly grown up kids, the wife, literally like as good a Republican as you can get, but still saying the same with the same little bit of edge to him. I'm in.
Yeah,
count me in.
He could do very well. I mean, I'm sure the country will totally change. I mean, or I should say, media will continue to change, where everything's going to be online and debates. Honestly, probably these debates we just saw. That J.D. Vance, I don't know if you saw it, but you probably saw some clips. J.D. Vance and
I've only seen the meme with his look to the side. That's all I know about the debate.
I think that's the last presidential/vice presidential debate we'll see on national television. I don't think it'll ever happen again.
Well, I've already seen the last one. I'll see because I don't watch those at all. I'll watch another Trump debate, but besides that, I don't think I would ever watch a political debate again.
I don't want to watch another Trump debate. He is so bad at debating. Like, I don't understand. Like, take example. We've talked about this a lot in the show. The Fine People hoax. It's been debunked. You literally just have to play the tape, take it back 30 seconds, and he says, I condemn the white supremacists. But when they bring it up, Trump says, Sean Hannity, he debunked that. Donald,
why
all you got to say is play the whole tape. You guys have the tape. Go back 30 seconds. I condemn the white supremacists. I don't know why you can't say that.
That would make sense. Yeah.
It's crazy. But it's that, and it's 100 other things. But I mean, I'm basically on the same page as you with Trump. So I had Jeremy Kauffman on the show. I think the episode was titled "The Libertarian Case for Donald Trump" or something like that, to get people to click it and listen. But it's really not a libertarian case for Donald Trump. It's not even like a freedom case or whatever, kind of case for Donald Trump. It's just the chance of things going that way a little bit. With Kamala, you have no chance. With Chase Oliver, you're wasting your vote. But with Donald Trump, at least you could get maybe Vivek in there, whisper something in his ear. Mm-hmm. Maybe he does follow through and at least reduce the Department of Education.
Maybe he really does end taxes on tips. Maybe he really does do some of this little stuff that would be awesome. which you just know that's not happening otherwise. It's like it's
Exactly.
100. They're very clear about that. You're going to get the same thing we got before, and probably worse, and probably more World War III. And that's what I wonder with all this foreign policy stuff. Here it is in October, and these things happen for reasons. I'm not saying there's a grand puppet master, but there's a lot of, look, Iran didn't just strike Israel without talking to a lot of people along the way, and I don't know who they all are. It didn't just happen overnight, and I find the whole thing very interesting. I find it interesting that we've seen a lot of missile strikes but no, I don't want to see these things, but I haven't seen any oh my God, look at these dead Israeli civilians. I haven't really seen that because they're shooting at supposedly military targets. If they really wanted to cause mass destruction, they clearly could either they could do it, or they're being allowed to kind of let these missiles through that they know aren't going to really harm civilians, to give an excuse for a wider war. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know the answers. I do think the timing is very interesting, though. Whether it's the current powers that be trying to cause as much chaos right now before the election, or whether it's we know Trump's winning, we're putting up this paper. And I've seen academic agent Nina Parvini has made this analogy, so I'm not going to pretend that it's original to me. But in professional wrestling, sometimes there's a term for a wrestler that everyone knows is going to lose. In fact, their whole role is to lose. They're called the jobber. All right. If you ever watched wrestling in the 80s, my favorite jobber was the guy named Barry Horowitz. He was the most famous wrestling jobber.
You remember his name? Wow.
Yes, Barry Horowitz. He was he was actually a well-known jobber. He would pat himself on the back. He had a whole thing. And one time he actually won a match, and that became this whole big deal but anyway, that's not the point. The point is Kamala is a jobber, or at least she appears to be a jobber. She appears to be someone that, we know you're not going to win. Yes, of course, all the wine ants will vote for her and whatnot, all the usual suspects, but you're not going to win. That's not why you're here. You're here because we know Trump has this thing, and we've kind of resigned ourselves to it. I mean, even more establishment type figures that would not give Trump the time of day 4 years ago are coming out in full support of Trump, like Jamie Dimon and things like this. I mean, to me, it's clear there are large elements of the establishment that have either conceded that he's going to win anyway, or are just fine with it and would actually maybe would even prefer it, because even if Trump is a wild card, it's not that much of a wild card, actually. We've seen him 4 years as president, okay? I don't think the bankers are scared of him like they might have been 4 years ago. He's not going to destroy the system. In fact, if anything, he's probably maybe someone like a Jerome Powell, who none of these people were going to look at as saviors. I don't think Jerome Powell wants to see the American capitalist system that his friends get to benefit from die. And I don't think Trump wants to see it die either. But the people currently, Janet Yellen does, the Europeans do. They want to see it die. So I think that's the battle going on right now. And for bad or for good, kind of, yeah. And for bad or for good, I truly don't believe people like Donald Trump and Jerome Powell and Elon Musk want to see the United States become a communist shithole. I really don't think they want that. I think they want it to be, if anything, what got them there, what lets them be rich here, and people like them be rich. It's
hard to sell Teslas in a communist shithole.
It can be. Yeah, it can be. So I think that's the battle going on right now. And I mean, yeah, I think in theory, Trump should be the president and all of this. But there's two things a dying animal can do, it can just accept its death and lay over, like a jobber would literally do in wrestling, lay over and look at the lights and accept their loss because that's their role. Or a dying animal could lash out and take its last gasps to that would be stealing the election even more blatantly, because it was pretty blatant last time. Anyone with their head on straight pretty much knows what happened. If you don't, you just didn't want to look into it. If you spend 20 minutes, literally, there's really not a question. Okay. So to do it again, it'll have to be actually even more obvious. It'll become even more obvious to even more people. And that's an even more dangerous position for the regime.
Yeah. Because they won't be able to do it the same way, because from a numbers standpoint, it would have to be different. The way they did it last time, it was through the mail-in ballots, and it was all harvested mail-in ballots. Who knows? Dead people who were in nursing homes, just all of these ballots that they brought in. If you look at the major states that had that, Pennsylvania, Virginia, I think even up in the Midwest, Wisconsin and Michigan, those states, mail-in ballot requests for Democrats are way down. Republican requests for mail-in ballots are up. So It would
So
have
they're
to
just
be
playing
totally,
the game better this time. I mean, because now that's the new game. The name is, it used to be like, how many people can you convince to vote for you? Okay. Now it's how many ballots can we harvest? And they both have to play that game now because the game has changed.
Exactly. So have you seen the docuseries on Netflix, the Octopus Murders?
I have not.
You would like it. It's only 4 episodes. We're actually going to do a conspiracy corner on it. Me and Brian and Rico.
I put all my time into the Mr. McMahon documentary recently. So
well, I plan on watching that too.
Now, if you do a show about that, you can bring me on.
I think we probably will. But you were just talking about like, oh, what's happening with Iran, who's talking to Iran, like, and it made me think of with the Octopus Murders. It talks about Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter election, where the hostages in Iran, obviously with them being there and being hostages, that hurt Jimmy Carter, that he wasn't able to bring them home. And the speculation is that there was somebody on Reagan's team who was facilitating paying off the hostages staying there because it helped Reagan. Reagan wins in a landslide. Just so happens hours later, the hostages were released.
Yeah, I've heard that theory before. I mean, so something like it was things like that. You're like, okay, we don't know what happened here, but clearly there's something behind, because things are not timed that way by accident.
Yeah, and this whole thing, it goes into like that being a piece to all these other things on the. It's an octopus because it's all these different dots connected, tentacles connected. It's pretty interesting.
I will check.
That's a teaser. If you want to hear us break it down, join the Lions Liberty Pride. That's a high-level teaser textbook. All right. Well, we are coming up on an hour here, Mark. Anything else that we need to hit on? Plans for the future for Marc Clair. Where do you see yourself? 5-10 years.
5-10 years. That's interesting. Interesting. 5 years. I might be in the same place I am now. I mean, not like same every place. Hopefully better finances, better this, maybe another human or so around. 10 years. I have to think in 10 years, I probably won't live in the country. I think I probably will be a full expat by then, most likely. I mean, we could do it now is the truth. Like with what I'm making online, we could live in another country and like make it work, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to just make it work. I want to be really, really good. I want it to be like, oh, I'm making like 4 times what we need to make. Because the thing about moving to the other country too is, yeah, okay, probably we can't do a lot of the normal things. Like now, if we were short on money, either me or my wife can get work on the ground. We work in television production. We do photography. Like she does photography. We can get work here. That's harder to do in another country, but depending on the country. Like for her, it would be easier in Mexico, of course, but still not the same level you can make money here. So now we're kind of in this halfway where I'm making money, a lot of money online, like a lot in relative relation to what I was making, a couple of years ago, which was like 10% or 5%. Now it's over half of what I make is online. So we're certainly way more in that direction. And if need be, could probably move tomorrow if shit went down here or something like that. But I think as far as shit hitting the fan in America, I feel pretty good being in Florida of all places. I just don't think the same kind of shit will hit. But I could be naive about that. I could just be justifying my own decision after the fact kind of thing. But I feel pretty good about where we are. Certainly a lot better than I would if we were in Los Angeles or anything like this. But 10 years, I got to think if things go on the trajectory they've been, it would be hard to see us not having made that move in 10 years. I would be pretty surprised if we were at least weren't doing it like half the year kind of thing.
Snowbirds. You're going to turn into snowbirds.
Maybe the international version of snowbirds, perhaps. Yeah. But I don't need a place to be cold ever. I don't like the cold. So I like to visit the snow like for like a day and then I'm good.
And you grew up in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Is that why? Because it was just so traumatic?
Yeah, it was terrible. Between Buffalo and Connecticut, I mean, I never want to do.
You're a Bills fan, but you grew up in Connecticut. Wait, did you ever live in Buffalo?
Yeah, until I was 8 years old.
Okay.
From 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., having to get up sometime in that time period simply to warm the house, in my case. By the way, you want to hear an old man story? I used to get up, I'm not even kidding, in 7th grade and 8th grade. Finally, my parents got a oil heater. And when I went into 9th grade, I believe, before that, I used to get up, get wood from outside. Hopefully it would be on the porch by then if my dad brought some in, start a fire with newspaper and logs and all this in our wooden stove in our house, start the fire, run back into my bed, freezing for 30 minutes, let the fire heat up, and then bring my clothes. Right. This is in the 90s. All right. It's not the 1890s. This is the 1990s. and then bring my clothes, change in front of the fire, and then if I was driving, obviously I wasn't driving in middle school, so I'm going to skip some years here. But then once I was driving, you got to do the same thing with your car. It's so fucking cold. You got to turn on your car. You got to scrape it off. I never want to live like that, Odie. I respect the people that do. I just don't understand them. I'm a sun person now.
My wife grew up in a house that was heated primarily by a wood burner, just like you're talking about horrible. There. And yeah, once you get it going though, the house is like it's toasty,
it's awesome when you're in front of it. I mean, it's like you don't get that kind of heat from an oil burner, but you got to be in that 10 foot, 5-10 foot radius of the stove, or else you're just freezing.
But did you notice that all of your clothes smell like a wood burner all the time?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you came to Penn State, then you were like, that was like moving to the South.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, if anything, it's pretty much a similar climate, I would say.
Yeah, pretty close.
All that.
All right, man. Well, plugs. What you got to plug?
Well, I don't got to plug a Marc Clair show, but you can follow me on. I'm still going to call it Twitter, on X, at Marc Clair Show. That is still my handle, MarcClair show, at Marc Clair Show, and of course follow Mikkel Thorup on Twitter too, and follow. Come join us at the summit, man. expatmoneysummit.com.
Friend of the show, Dan Smuts.
Give me your email, and I'll give you a ticket to see guys you like Ron Paul, like Doug Casey, like Tom Luongo, like Tom Woods, like Scott Horton. You love these guys, and they're speaking for free. Do your old pal a favor. Go get yourself a free ticket at expatmoneysummit.com. That's all I ask. It's literally all I ask.
Go get your tickets. Dan Smuts, I'm looking at you. Go get your Expat Money Summit.
Maybe I'll go on your podcast next, Daniel. He asked me a couple weeks ago. He was busy. I'd like to, though.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming back to Lions of Liberty, Marc. We miss you. It's great to talk with you. I'm sure the audience really enjoyed this, and
I hope so.
Hopefully, this is our most popular episode of the year.
Someone did.
All right, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Adios.
All right, that's a wrap for the show, everyone. I will see you all next week. If you like this show, and if you want, I teased Conspiracy Corner. Please join the Lions of Liberty Pride. In the meantime, so you can get access to our bonus content. Other than that, that's all I got. Talk to you next week. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.